What's up YouTube? My name's Alec and this is Cinemoto. This is the YouTube channel where I work on dirt bikes, mini bikes, pretty much anything with two wheels. This is a 1979 Kawasaki KX125 A5. This is a pretty limited production bike. From what I understand, they made somewhere around 5,000 to 5,500 of these units worldwide in the year of 1979. So I picked this thing up earlier this year at a swap meet for really cheap, and this is pretty much how I got it. Now, I did get the jug and the head, but they were sitting in a box. They seem to be in okay condition, so I'm hoping this thing won't need too much more to get it going. Obviously, this thing is in okay shape. It's a little bit beat up, but for a 1979, I would say it's in really good shape overall. So this bottom end has been sitting uncovered for who knows how many years. The crank feels good, the bearings feel smooth. From what I was told, it just needed a piston. So before I put money and time into splitting this bottom end open, I got a new piston, I got all the parts. We're gonna put this thing back together and see if it'll run. Now, obviously it was missing the carburetor. It was also missing the intake boot, the reeds, the expansion chamber, or the exhaust pipe, if you will. I have hunted all those things down over the past few months. This has been quite a journey to get these parts. Things are not quite easy to find for these older bikes, but I got them all, so we're gonna get this thing together and see if it'll run, if it has spark, you know, what this thing's gonna take, because this is a sweet bike and I wanna race this thing in some vintage races this upcoming year. Show you a couple before shots, then I'll show you the parts that I acquired over the past couple months, and then we'll get to working on this thing and get it put together, see if it'll run. So here's everything I had to get. Starting back to front, I had to get a carburetor. This is a brand new Mikuni VM33. This is pretty much an exact copy of what came on this bike, brand new. And then going forward, I had to get this new intake boot to go on here. Hotfoot Moto is a company that makes this. To my knowledge, they're the only company that makes this, so I was able to get this through them, and luckily that came with the gasket and these nice, I believe these are stainless Allen head screws, so that was really nice. I sourced a couple of clamps, one for the air boot and one for the intake boot. These are pretty close to original. The reed cage I was completely missing, so I sourced this actually on eBay. This is a new old stock Kawasaki part, OEM. And then moving over here, so to get a piston kit, I pretty much only use Pro X or Wasner. And so I could still get a Wasner piston for this thing. The shipping takes a little while because they come from Germany, and you have to buy every piece individually. So I found this company Vintco online, and they only make parts for these vintage bikes, and they offered a complete top end kit with everything included. I got a wrist pin bearing, the piston, there's a piston pin in there, the circlips, the rings, and then a gasket kit. And so I got this really quick, and I was looking at the quality, and honestly everything looks really good. I was super surprised at the quality of this, and I matched this head gasket up. I did have the OEM head gasket, and they look pretty much identical. Everything else is looking good. Now, this is what shocked me the most in a great way. So this thing actually comes with a German-made Wasner piston. So look at that. I didn't even have to go through Wasner. I just went through Vintco and I actually got a Wasner product, or Wasner built product. And I couldn't be more happy. Obviously, anyone who's familiar with Wasner knows they make incredibly high quality forged pistons. So this is going to be an awesome addition to this thing. And I really don't even know what they offer for these older bikes, but anything air-cooled, I've always ran a forged piston in. So I just find that they're a little more durable, especially because air-cooled bikes like to run hot, and durability is key on these things. So these are all the parts I had to purchase new. There's my OEM cylinder and my OEM head, both in pretty darn good shape. As you can see, the head is in excellent shape, actually. Probably one of the harder parts I had to source was an OEM expansion chamber, which you can see right here. I got that off eBay, and that cost me a pretty penny. Definitely not easy to find. I do know that Gemco Exhaust, I believe they're out of Kentucky, still makes an aftermarket one. But I'm just going for the OEM look on this bike. So I found a used OEM one, and I was pretty happy with it. So now we just got to get everything cleaned up and assembled here. So since I bought this bike, I've actually never even washed or made any attempt to clean it because obviously with the top end missing, I don't want to get any debris in there. So I've just kind of let this thing sit dirty. And I don't want to pull the bottom end apart just yet. I think I might end up doing that a little later, but I just want to see if this thing is going to run, and I'm pretty excited to hear it fire up. So what I'm going to do, the play on the crank looks good, the bearings look good. It's actually sitting in oil. There's still oil in the case here, in the crank. So I'm not really too concerned about the crank being no good. At this point, I'm more concerned about getting all the gunk and dirt out of there. So what I'm gonna try, without splitting the cases and taking this whole thing apart, I'm just gonna try and blow this thing out, put some parts cleaner in there, clean it out, re-oil it, get it as clean as I can, and then put the top end on. And we'll just hope for the best here, because I really don't want to split these cases, and especially if the transmission's still in good shape. That might come back to haunt me later, I'm not sure yet, but we're gonna try it this way. All right, how's that? Vintage bikes are full of vintage surprises. You know, that's not the worst homemade air filter I've ever seen. That's actually pretty genius. I mean, it worked, clearly. Interesting. So before we can get this cylinder on the engine and the rings installed on the piston, we just always want to make sure we check our end gap here to make sure this is within spec. Obviously this is an unknown condition cylinder, so I measured it out. It appeared to be stock bore. I ordered the stock bore piston and rings. So here's our service manual, and it contains the end gap information. So the service limit is 0.7 millimeters, which that's pretty big. So we'll pull up 0.7 here. You definitely, any more gap than this, these rings are no good. So this does have a little more gap than you'd want. I'm getting about a 0.4 millimeters, so it's a little bit bigger than what it should be, but obviously this cylinder is a little bit worn down. This is not in new condition anymore. That'll still be good enough to run. It doesn't fall out of that service limit. This is still within service, so we're gonna run this thing. This is old stuff. This bike does not get ridden every day. I'm not super worried about it. If it does blow up, we're gonna start over fresh and redo everything anyway. So at least we know our rings are within service limit. They're not quite perfectly in spec, but they are still within working spec. So we're gonna get these rings on the piston and get this cylinder installed. So the base nuts get torqued down to 16 foot-pounds and the head bolts get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. So we'll torque this head down in a star pattern, and anytime you do this, you want to just get everything started nice and even. And then personally, I always do half intervals or stepping up intervals, and in this case I'm doing it, and this is the first one of the star pattern. This case I'm going to do half intervals. So I'm starting at 9 foot-pounds. Gonna get these all snugged up at 9. And then I'm gonna bring them up to 18. This just ensures that the head is getting torqued evenly and it's not warped anywhere. I finally got both the air boot and the intake boot on and the clamps on. It was actually fairly difficult. I got the air boot sprayed out here with some contact cleaner, and I got a brand new NGK BR9 ES spark plug. How about it? We got some spark. Alright guys, so just like that we got the engine back together. I have no idea about the jetting on this thing. We're totally shooting in the dark here, but we're going to get outside and see if this thing wants to fire at all. Alright, just turn the gas on and see if it'll fill up that full bowl. So now that we know this thing runs, and it runs pretty darn good, we're going to change the transmission oil out on it. Once we change the transmission oil, we'll continue doing our heat cycles on this new top end, and then after that we can finally ride this thing. So let's get this oil drained here. So I got the oil drained out of it here, and I noticed that the seal on the shift shaft was leaking a little bit. it was weeping oil out of here. So we're gonna take this opportunity while we have the clutch cover off to pull that shift shaft out and then replace that seal so it stops leaking. So yesterday I got the oil drained on this thing and I ran into a major issue when attempting to replace the clutch plates in this thing. So obviously, like any bike, the first thing you're gonna do is pop this clutch cover off. I got the linkage off for the cable arm. I got the Kickstarter off, and then obviously the brake pedal has to come off to be able to slide this clutch cover off. Either the pedal or the bolt swelled or had some type of corrosion, and they froze together solid, and no amount of heat would get this thing to budge. I actually ended up melting the pedal a little bit, melting the aluminum, just heating it up so hot. So really at that point, my only option was to cut the head of the bolt off. And now I'm left with the task of trying to slide the brake pedal backwards, because it has to go this way, to get that off, to get the bolt off so we can replace the bolt, which luckily you can still find. But to do any of that, this brake pedal comes in contact with the case, which means my only option is to pull the entire engine out at this point. There's no other way around it. This is really frustrating, but it's the only thing we can do. I'm not willing to ruin this brake pedal, as these are extremely hard to come by, and this one's in good shape. So I want to keep it that way. So we're gonna have to do this delicately, and unfortunately the best way is to pull the motor so we can get in there and heat it up and tap it off as nice and gently as possible. So I'm gonna throw you guys out a time lapse, and we're gonna get this motor out of the frame. So I got the engine unbolted. Obviously, I'm not gonna pull this thing all the way out because I still have the ignition system all hooked up, and there's really no need to disconnect it. I just needed to get it out of the way. So now I can take this brake pedal and with maybe a little heat and a little persuasion, slide it off the shaft here. And then we could get this broken bolt out of the way. So that's gonna be our next task. Well, I really did mar that thing up pretty gnarly, but it's gonna be salvageable. I'm definitely gonna have to clean that thing up now and smooth it out, get it vapor blasted. But it is a success. I did get the bolt unthreaded after, of course, cutting the head off and moving the motor out of the way, which wasn't fun, but we got it, so that's what matters. And I mean, truthfully, this had to come out because if you're ever at the track and you need to do clutch plates, you need to be able to pop that clutch cover off. So when I put the new bolt in, I'm gonna be shaving a little bit off of it and then making it greasable so it can easily be re-greased, and that will not happen again. I popped out the old shift shaft seal up in there, and I got the brand new OEM Kawi one. So I just gotta very delicately pop that into place. All right, the KX is finally back together. The clutch ended up being a total nightmare just due to the fact that the brake lever had seized on over all the years and corrosion between that bushing. So I ended up having to pop that out, as you'll see in the video, and buy a new bolt. I had to take the entire engine out just to get that thing apart. And so I ended up putting new hardware in it. I painted the exhaust with some high temp paint while I was there, and now it's all back together. So we're gonna fire this thing up and try and ride it, and hopefully this time the clutch will engage and disengage, which it was not doing before. So we got brand new clutch plates in there, and everything's reassembled and torqued to specs. It's gonna be a complete cold start. I have not ran this thing in quite some time.